because I knew anytime I gave Demerol, they were going to start yakking. So I always just mixed it. So I was making, my Paradine, but it works.
Yeah. Oh, it was a good drug. It really was.
Yep.
I enjoyed it.
So when did you leave?
That's
the
why they
coast,
took
man?
it off the truck. Vic Stewart.
Yeah.
The reason they took my Paradine off the truck. Not all of us had a cell phone in our pocket when we were going. We actually had to organically walk up and, oh my God, had to talk to people and communicate that way. It wasn't IRL, LOL, STFU. That's one of my favorites. No, but anyway. Everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Gettin 10-8. Always great to have y'all come back, and man, do I have a panel for y'all tonight. I have right next to me Mr. Len Marshall, and we're going to get into the introductions here in just a second. Just below me, you see Scott St.Germain. You've seen him on the show several times, as well as Vic Stewart down below Len Marshall. Vic's been on the show several times, and I believe you know them. But Len, since you are the new person to this podcast, why don't you give kind of a background of who you are and how you got started in EMS and wheres and whens and particulars like that?
All right. Well, this actually starts my 40th year in EMS. And the way I got started, I guess a lot of people my age, I grew up watching Emergency, Squad 51, Johnny and Roy, and I actually got to meet Randolph Mantooth a few years ago, but at a trauma symposium. But it kind of, I always thought that was fascinating. And when I was a teenager, I wasn't the best behaved kid in the world. And my mom had married a man from Mississippi, and we moved down here. And we were riding around in the Hattiesburg area one day, and I saw this helicopter land on the interstate at a wreck. And I said, man, that's what I want to do. And he said, boy, you're going to have to straighten yourself up before you ever do anything like that. So, and I lived in Poplarville, and I saw some fire trucks go through town one day, and I followed them and got to talking to those guys and got on the fire department. But at that time, the fire department ran the ambulance service, and it was a volunteer service. So I'd ride with them. And what was funny, we had these little radios, and when there was no 911, and somebody dialed the fire phone, we'd answer it, and they'd say, hey, they got a wreck down here on 53 by Joe Blow's house. And everybody knew who that was. And somebody'd run, grab the ambulance, and they'd say, where's the EMT at? And they said, well, I'm at the Sonic. And they run by their code 3, pick them up,
Pick
and
them
run
up.
to the wreck. Yeah. And so I said, well, I want to get my EMT. And I'll tell you, somebody that really helped me a lot. I don't know if y'all remember Monty Gerald was the intermediate around the fire department. So him and Bobby Strahan, they got me involved in that, got my EMT. And I was excited about, because I wanted to be one of them guys that the ambulance come through town and pick me up with my friends. Well, the city decided that the ambulance service just wasn't really beneficial to them anymore, so AAA come in. And I was too young to drive, so I started dispatching a while for them. And so I dispatched with them up there in, they had a little old wooden frame house beside Forest General. There was a corner of Arlington Loop and 28th Avenue.
Yep.
So I spent about a year or so in there until I got old enough to drive, and I started just branching in doing that. And at the time that I'd started, there weren't very many paramedics at all in the state. And so I really thought these guys would, walked on water, And so I didn't become a paramedic until some time later. But I had, since AAA kept me in, I still consider that my home service. That's where I started.
Right.
But once you get in dispatch, a lot of times it's hard to get out. And so I heard that they was game warden had bought an ambulance service over in Bogalusa. And
no.
I ran over there and
Bloody
worked with
corking.
him for a while. And man, it's like some of the ambulances were homemade. They had a Chevrolet, had racing rims on it. And between the
That was the Suburban or the van?
No.
I rode in the Suburban. I had to sit all bent over.
Yeah.
But
He's
that
talking about
old
the little van.
171.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they had between the patient compartment and the driver's compartment, had a piece of plywood with indoor outdoor carpet in it, and
Yep.
had a hole cut in it.
Yeah,
And
never
I got
mind that bacteria.
I remember I walked in the door up there, and there's a bunch of them sitting around, and they said, he's hired, he's EMT. And they said, go talk to Miss Maddie Faye. And I went down to the kidney center and talked to Miss Maddie Faye, and she's like, you're hired. Didn't know me from Adam. And so I started doing that. And then you remember how we'd work the truck to about 6, and we have to go work the hospital as techs. And I went over there a lot, and I pulled a lot of them shifts with Sonny himself. And
What year was that?
that was an
Wendy?
adventure. Man, it's probably 87, 88.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
like that.
it was before I got there. When I ended up going to Washington Parish Ambulance Service when they didn't have ALS, and
Yeah, me too.
I went there to bring ALS to them. I was the first paramedic working at Washington
Right.
Parish Ambulance Service, so I helped write the protocols, and the protocols that I wrote were very liberal because the doctors at the charity hospital said they weren't interested in doing a whole bunch of communicating with us. So our protocols pretty much until you got ready to do a cricothyroidotomy or decompress a lung or give morphine, Valium, or Demerol, you pretty much you're good. And then everything else was on protocol. No matter where we took the patient, we would have to go back to the charity hospital with all of our reports and get them signed off. Yeah, that was, I did that in I think that was 90. I was there for, I wasn't there but about 6 months. It was me and Mark that lives in Columbia, Mississippi, came, and he was my opposite. And we were working that Panama schedule, the 48-72 schedule. And I lived in the trailer right there behind the ambulance service, and that was the / operations office and my bedroom.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing that trailer can't talk.
Yeah.
I'm not saying nothing. I was perfectly Rob in that trailer.
Sat around, read your Bible and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's what I was doing. I had Bible study in there on a regular basis. We got
I
him.
didn't use that trailer anymore. They had already built on an
wing.
office on a wing on the front side closer to the road there.
Let's see, I went over to Louisiana, and then I met some people from Priority. I went work with Priority down in Slidell. I mean, I made a great friend, guy named Alan Crawford. He got me on at Priority, and me and him worked together, and he's still a good friend of mine today. But, eventually I just kept at it, hauling away at it, went to paramedic school. Me and Vic went to paramedic school together. And if I ain't mistaken, we probably the only two still hold a license out of that class. I don't know. And I finally got to get on Rescue 7. But by then, my stepdad, he didn't get to see me. He'd already died, But I got into that, and I did some offshore time and stuff. And then time, I've been with Acadia and AMR, stuff like, with EMS, you move around a lot,
Chasing that dollar. Who's paying $1 an hour more? That's where I'm going.
That's the way it was, But I eventually went on and, jump ahead. I started flying full time, but by the time I got it on later, we had to be FPCs, critical care paramedics, and it was, a lot different when, it stepped onto that. You had 2 providers on board, and, I'd never give up that time I spent with Rescue 7 initially, because the pilots we had, a lot of them were from Vietnam and stuff like that. And they'd come in down to some of these trees, and we'd stand out on a skid watching them put the tail between birdhouses and stuff. And of course, now it's a lot more conservative now.
What was Bill's last name?
Hale.
Bill Hale.
He would come across that parking lot and take his time. You could see that cigarette glowing at night walking across there.
Yep.
When he'd sit in the seat, he'd have to pull his legs up in there. But when he got in the air, that man was an ace.
Absolutely.
He was an
Absolutely.
ace, man.
Len, is there true to it that he would auto rotate back when he'd go to fuel up?
Yeah, they're supposed to do like certain amount of autotations, for a while to kind of count for their check rides. But he would do that in there with us. He said, "Hey, let me show you what happens when the engine goes out." Next thing, you ever rode that tower or tear at Disney World?
Yep.
That's what it felt like, when he come to the
Yeah.
ground. But
Well,
that was a
he
lot
did
of
that
fun.
with he did that with all of us at orientation.
He'd say, "Let me show you what negative G's feel like."
Oh yeah.
Yep. Yep.
I've heard that story, and I had a hard time believing it.
No, it's God's honest truth. Was it me that told you that he did that?
No, this goes back a long time. It was
Okay.
like every time this pilot would go and fuel up,
Well,
he'd
they
auto-rotate
once
back
a
down.
week they had to do an auto rotation once a week. Well,
Wow.
Bill would do it every time he went into flight to fuel up, and he fueled up at Bobby Chain Airport was where they'd go fill up.
And even later on, I went back in the air around. Let's see, it's the late 2000s. I mean, 16, 17, somewhere around that area.
So you weren't in the L3 anymore. Now you were up in
So,
what?
We did that. Well, we did when we started there. There's the second B model, and
Yep.
then we went to the L3.
Yep.
I had went offshore when they got the Augusta, but I did ride in it a couple of times to help some medics get in, and that machine was very, very fast.
Yes.
We would take off from Poplarville, and they're like, "Man, give your report now. We'll be in Hattiesburg in 12 minutes." And I did get to ride a couple of times on it, and then I'd went offshore for a while. But when I got into it later on, I'd worked with the Medtrans and Rescue 7. They contracted out. At first, it was to Oshner, kind of took care of it for them, and then Medtrans come in and they contracted to the district to do that. But they sent us for a couple of weeks out to Denton, Texas, to like a flight academy, and we would ride with the pilots as they checked off then, and they still had to auto rotate and stuff like that. We'd all see what it was like and our roles, and like talking to the pilot, like if they were flying in the clouds, you can't tell which way's up a lot of times. And we had a sheet that we would read from to coach the pilot, like climb to this speed and all this kind of stuff, kind of do a checkoff sheet to it if we weren't hollering and screaming, but it changed a whole lot. We were always thinking, I always thought back at the times to when we, it's some very sophisticated aircraft now, but I know back in the L3 and the B model, stuff like that, you couldn't turn on a light in the back at night to blind the pilot. And we had a little light we would hold right here sometime, to shine on people.
Here's another thing that I want to mention. A lot of people may not know this, but the first civilian air ambulance in the United States was in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. It was Rescue 7. And it was because they were finding in Vietnam patients that they were picking up by a medevac and getting to an evac hospital were doing so much better than doing the ground units, going through the MASH units, and then heading to evac, that if they had a critical patient, they picked them up with a helicopter and got them straight to the evac hospital, they had a much better survival ratio. So they said, where would this work in the United States where we can see if this will work on the civilian population? And Hattiesburg happened to be the hub of all outside of Hattiesburg. It was very rural areas. And Hattiesburg was the hub. That's where Force General Hospital was. And people think, well, Hattiesburg, it's only got, 80,000 people in it. But you got to look at the greater Hattiesburg area. It's right across the river is Petal, and that's part, you got to count that in the numbers because everybody's doing business in Hattiesburg. So it's a metropolitan area. So all these rural areas, they didn't have the ambulance network that could get out there and transport these patients quickly. So Rescue 7 came in. Now, there are a lot of air ambulances, but they're basically doing hospital-to-hospital transports. There's not many. Acadian's real good with on-the-scene helicopter services and their air meds 1 through 4. And Hattiesburg was doing on-scene medical where they would fly out and pick up patients from the actual emergency. Most helicopters are used to transport patients quickly in between the hospitals, and it all started with little old southeast Mississippi. Wasn't it 71 when Rescue 7 was commissioned, or was it 70?
I'm not sure the exact dates, but and uh, I don't know the program or whatever, but supposedly there was a grant to experiment with those things. And I think
Exactly.
the first one started here, and I think later they put on a couple more in Mississippi, but like in Tupelo and things
Yeah,
like
but
that.
we were the
And
first.
the reason they called it Rescue 7, they did it according to the highway patrol districts. And then because a lot of people thought it was the county number of counties, but that's the reason it started. They started adding counties and get together and go ahead and fund this. And as far as I know, I mean, I remember at one time it was the only tax supported flight service in the country. And it's been the longest continuous running flight service in the country. But, we don't get a lot of positive recognition here in Mississippi. And it's just not advertised or anything like that. But I know me and Vic worked at AAA, and I don't say the early days, but pretty early on. Not,
Oh, yeah.
we saw a lot of these developments, and that was, didn't realize it at the time, but there was history being made.
All right, you ready? Rescue 7 was founded in 1971 as a helicopter operated by the Southeast Mississippi Air Ambulance District to provide medical coverage for 5 counties in the region. This makes it the first emergency medical service in Mississippi to use an air response. The year was 1971.
Impressive.
History lesson.
Well, Len, what year were you at Washington Parish? What was the time frame there?
Oh, me, it was probably, I want to say 87. I was full time for about a year. And then I went to working in Slidell, and I stayed part time up there for a while, and filled in some shifts and stuff like that. But this was the late 80s.
Okay. Yeah, because in 90, I grew up in Slidell and was going out to Washington Parish to go until I went to paramedic school on the coast and then discovered mobile medic in that group over here, which I thought really had it together.
Priority One had just come into Slidell. They was competing against Emergency One, which was owned by Slidell Memorial. Mm-hmm. And I'd always wanted to get on with them. I heard they great money, great benefits, good equipment. And then I'd tried to get on there for a while. And Priority was kind of a new company, and I loved the people and stuff like that. But I was wanting to get married, and I needed some good benefits. And I remember Sandy Dubaz had took over as the operations manager over there. And I'd see her up and I'd hit her up. And I remember the day she called me and offered me a job. Man, I was so happy, I stayed over there about 6 or 7 years until Acadian come in and took over.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you work with Cooper?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Huey.
Yeah, he come over and he worked on the coast with us a bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember that.
Coop,
he worked with, when it was AmServe.
No, Coop was at Mobile Medic. Coop
Yeah,
lived.
But I think he did some AmServe time too.
He might have.
Yeah, I did. I was at Mobile Medic as a EMTA and ended up at AMS when I was a paramedic when I went to AmServe. But Coop lived right down the alley from where I was living in Gulfport. And we both were at Mobile Medic back when we were both EMTAs, and we're right there neck and neck in age. So
I think he's still working ER in Slidell over there.
I don't know if he's
a nurse prac.
Oh, he's a nurse practitioner.
Yeah, he's a nurse prac. I think I don't know if he's in the ER anymore. I think he might be on the floor.
He's doing hospitalist now, I think, because of the hours and got a little bit better clientele,
Yep.
So, but I saw him not too long ago down there. He's
good.
He's pretty mellowed out now. I guess like the rest of us in our old age.
Well, it took us long enough to get there. Some of us, anyway. Yeah. Me.
Yeah.
I don't think Pontius is mellowed out.
No, he's still wound up tighter than an 8-day clock. And you're pretty wound tight too now, Germain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I've had folks on here that have worked the air ambulance. Like Vic's been on here, but we never really talked about working the air ambulance versus working a ground unit. And there are some subtle differences, when you're dealing with altitude and how you're treating your patients. When is it that you notice a difference in that, Len, working Rescue 7 and you're dealing with altitude?
Well, with a lot of the local aircraft around here, they're not pressurized. You start having issues when you get above 8,000 feet. That's why a lot of time the helicopters don't fly near that high. Around here, it's not that big of a problem, but I know like in the Rocky Mountains, Appalachians and stuff like that, you may already be at 6,000 feet above sea level. And then so you got to watch about, getting higher than that. But some things that are affected, like you got Dalton's law and Boyle's law. And don't sit here, I can't explain them to you because I stopped charting to memory. That's what I can look at a chart with.
Right.
But things like things that expand, like a pneumothorax will get worse. And there's been times where people might have a simple pneumothorax in one of these outlying hospitals, and we would request a chest tube because once we get up, they can expand and make it worse. IV fluids, sometimes when you're descending, they'll like start flowing fast, and when you get up, they'll slow down. That's why we have to use pumps and stuff like that in the air to make sure we get what we need to be. Now, I took the FPC test a few years ago. It's kind of like registry, it don't just focus on local scopes. It covers like worldwide things. And they would give us some formulas on there, like if we had a patient that had to be on 30% FiO2 at this altitude, what would we have to increase it to to win any higher?
Right.
And because around here you don't have to worry about that. They're not going to fly that much with it, but the pilots will consider, like if it's something Hattiesburg to Jackson, they'll say like Hayes or any stipulation or whatever, but they do have minimums they got to stay at. So, but around here we're fortunate enough to where that doesn't really play a big role in it. Now, even like I know in the higher altitudes or sometimes in the fixed wings, the ET cuffs will actually expand and can cause damage. And that's why a lot of times they'll use saline instead of air in it. So they
Right.
can expand and cause it damage to the trach.
Right.
So that's a few differences on it. Like I said, I don't have
Mass
memory.
trousers are affected if you were using mass trousers in a helicopter.
They expand.
Were you still using mass trousers
No.
by the time you got to the helicopter?
No, but I believe they work because my wife's here today because of them.
Oh,
She had not to get real personal, but we hadn't been married long, and she had an internal bleeding episode. And of course, I called the ambulance. We didn't have a phone or anything then because we newlyweds had a couch or chair, And so I got on my fire radio and called and said, "Hey, what was going on?" And I remember it was back when Monty and Bobby Trey was on the ambulance. They all started coming out there, and the AAA unit in Poplarville at the time was an intermediate unit. And so they took her to the local hospital. Man, I was just, it's kind of one of them things to where she was in bad shape and I knew it, but I was in denial. So when that helicopter landed, it was Gray Nichols. And I was like, wow, to me, Gray walked on water. And he put her in the mass trousers and stuff like that, took her to Slidell Memorial. Everything was fine. Everything turned out good. She's here. Was in '89. So, but we used mass trousers on him. And, at one time we thought that they pushed the blood out of the lower extremities up, but it actually just shut it off to where it just stayed up in the central location. So, they worked. And because she didn't have a palpable blood pressure.
I used to use them in my full arrests. I used to put them
I've
on
seen
full
you use them.
arrest patients, so when you're doing
I've seen them, but-
compressions, you're keeping all the blood up in the core.
that's
Well,
a lot of time.
when I was in Slidell at this time, but over in New Orleans, they it depended on what resident service was in the charity that day.
They'd cut the bastards off. They'd cut them off.
Like one day they would have on there, this is a 2-lane day, we're using lactated ringers and mass trousers. And the
Yeah.
next day might be an LSU day, we're using normal saline and no mass trousers. So I mean, that's kind of the way they was learning from this. And I teach a PHTLS, and one of the fathers of PHTLS was Dr. Norman McSwain in New Orleans. So
Right.
we didn't know it, but that was the time they was learning and studying and creating these things that we're using today.
Right.
Let me ask you, since you said that, Len, what is the protocol today in trauma? Is it still normal saline, or is it
Nope.
back to volume expanders?
You remember ringers went away for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
At
now
least
it's
my
coming.
protocols I did.
It's coming back as the fluid of choice now because one thing in trauma, the killer, you got the triad of trauma. You got that coagulopathy if they get cold, blood don't clot, and of course acidosis. And we were loading people up with normal saline, which has a pH of 5.5. Ringers is 6.5.
Really?
So we were making DKA worse. We were making sepsis. People get acidotic. So LR is pretty much the fluid of choice now because of the pH shift and stuff. And we don't load them up with fluid anymore because we're diluting the blood carrying capability of the blood. So, we would put so much fluid in them, they'd bleed out like translucent.
Look like
red
Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Kool-Aid.
And
They're more wide open.
but now, like I taught a trauma class a couple of weeks ago to a group, and now it's called permissive hypotension. You want to give them just enough to keep that systolic around 80 to 90. And just they drop below, hit them again, because you don't want to dilute the clotting factors and O2 carrying capability. So you keep it around that. And more so than pressures now, they measure it with the MAP, mean arterial pressure. And you got to have a minimum of 65 to maintain end organ perfusion. So you got to keep it above that. And it's figured up like the systolic times the diastolic times 2 and divide it by 3. It gives you those numbers. And one way to do that is just look at your little blood pressure reading, and it does it for you.
Yeah.
But
These days, my sphygmometer didn't do that.
No. And we probably, back in those days, we weren't really taught about a lot of that stuff. We were just like, man, if it's low, load them up.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Wide open. Two of
absolutely. Them. I mean, Vic and I sat around and we were writing down all the drugs that we were carrying back when I was on the truck, and then I'm going, well, do we carry that anymore? Nope. They carry that anymore? Nope. But now they're carrying all these drugs that we didn't carry. You know, we didn't have ketamine or Dilaudid or Ativan. We had we had morphine, Demerol, and Valium, and that was our controls that we were.
We didn't even have Demerol.
Yeah,
but Demerol's gone away.
Yeah,
I don't remember. It's probably been off the truck 12 years or so.
The only time I was using Demerol is if somebody had an allergic to sulfur drugs, morphine sulfate, and I always gave Demerol. I always gave Phenergan with it. Because I knew anytime I gave Demerol, they were going to start yakking. So I always just mixed it. So I was making, meperidine, but it works.
Yeah. Oh, it was a good drug. It really was.
Yep.
I enjoyed it.
So when did you leave?
That's why they took it off the truck. Vic Stewart. The reason they took meperidine off the truck.
I think the mid-90s, I went back up to Hattiesburg because that's when I was wanting to go to paramedic school at Forest General.
Okay.
And so I went up there. It's a lot more convenient for me. I got talked into the Forest. I was going to go to the Gulf Coast, but guy I've known since I moved to Mississippi, and y'all know Joe Jones. He just took over the paramedic program at Forest General, and he's like, "Well, come on up there. They got a good program," and it was actually a real good program. At the time, I didn't realize it, but you look back now at the involvement that our medical control physicians had in that program. They owned it. That was their baby.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They was in their classes. And man, it was to the point to where you call on a report to the radio and they'd say, you say, hey, med control, and Dr. Nelson would say, all right, Vic, go ahead, what you got? And nowadays it's just nothing. I don't want to say nothing bad about nobody, but a lot of these young guys and girls today have never seen that type of a relationship.
No.
You mentioned Joe Jones. Joe had the unique ability. He had 60 to 80 birthdays every year.
That's right.
Depending on who the paramedic class was that he had.
Joe's streetwise. Now he knows how to do that.
No, go ahead, tell the story, Vic.
Every time we'd go out to eat during paramedic school, we'd to a restaurant, we'd tell the waitress it was his birthday to get a free dessert for him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think Ryan's out there on 98 West caught on to it, so we had to swap restaurants.
Front Porch was big about it.
Yeah.
You mentioned Gray Nichols, and Gray is. I talked to Gray the other day online. And I asked him. I said, "Gray, when are we going to have you on the show?" And he asked about, well, what is it? So I kind of explained, and I sent him an episode, and I hadn't heard a word from him, so he might be not going to do it. But
I might not hear from Gray for 6 months, and then he'll chime in and we'll talk. We went out to eat, met him and his wife here a few months ago. Went out and just talked, and and then every year we got to where we have this little reunion.
Yeah.
For some of the original Rescue 7 people, and we had one a few months ago, and I tell them now, those guys. So they're my mentors, Dan Moretta.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. If you were going to talk about Propeller Head, Dan Moretta, we called him Propeller Head. Then you had Gray Nichols, but Clyde Deschamps. Let's not forget Clyde. He was one of the paramedics at AAA, and he is now in Jackson.
he's something with the Department of Health. But when I first started out there, you talk to Clyde, he'll sit there like, just listen to you. You don't think he's listening to you, but he's listening to you.
Yeah.
And then he'll come back with this profound answer. I remember, I don't remember if it was Joe Jones sitting in there or whatever, but there's some newer paramedics sitting there talking to him one day, and it's like, what if? He said, just be able to say why.
That's right.
Be able to say why. And I use that today. I tell my students, if your judgment's clouded, fall back on your training, be able to say why.
Why you
And
did this, why you did that.
Or why you didn't. And I use that stuff that I picked up from Dan, Gray, Clyde, and all those guys today. And like I said, this is my 40th year, and I still use, despite all that technology, it doesn't mean anything if you can't say why.
Tell you, we left out a couple of others, Len, that I know neither one of. Well, I spoke to one of them here about a month and a half ago. You got Kevin Arnold.
Oh yeah.
And then Jim, well, his last name just left me.
The one that looked like Joe Diffie?
Yeah.
Drawn.
Jim Brown.
Joe Diffie. He looked like a clone of Joe Diffie, but he couldn't sing. He couldn't sing.
Didn't sound like him. Looked like him. Didn't sound like him.
He could make you laugh till you cried. No matter what the situation was, you'd be laughing when you shut the band.
But, Kevin Arnold, I remember him coming to work at Priority, brand new green EMT. And because he was, 900 foot tall.
Yeah.
And then I'd lost touch with him there for a while, and I was hearing radio reports in Slidell one night, and it was Kevin on a helicopter, and he'd become quite a legend himself.
Yeah. Yep, he sure did.
Those that we just mentioned, those are the ones you'd want picking up your kids.
Yeah.
And
well,
then
the various one, when I started off as an EMT basic, he told me one night, standing there at Maine outside, that I'd better go ahead and get in the next class, or he's going to be severely ill with me if I didn't get in the next paramedic class. Because I kept putting it off and just wouldn't go.
I put it off for a few years. Mm-hmm. But, like I say, Vic, those role models like that, they're not around. We don't have them anymore.
No, they don't exist no more.
And just don't. And I honestly, I really feel for a lot of these young medics getting into the field now and stuff like that. Some people are like, man, they just ain't the quality of medic and stuff like that. And me being an educator, a lot of it isn't really their fault. It's just there's no role models anymore, and they shortened the paramedic class to where not all of them, but a lot of them are just they train you to take the test.
That's it.
And I can have some of them now, man. They teach me stuff of this. They teach me this academic stuff.
Yeah.
And I try to tell them, your job is only 10% technical, 9% dealing with these human beings out there on the road.
That's
right.
right.
And that's what you got to look at, But and honestly, I helped this poor girl out the other day. I say poor girl, I mean, new paramedic. And it's one of them deals to where, they get on scene and there's arguments going on scene with families and people hollering and screaming. It's not that she didn't know what to do. It's just, when you have your first time like that, it's better to have like
overwhelming.
I didn't help her out of the situation, but because she needed that. But I was, gave a little bit of guidance and coaching like that. And just to look at her face, and that's just what a lot of them need. And there's just no big role models anymore.
Well,
right.
I think, I can't remember what episode it was, but we got to talk, and you were there, Scott. I think it might have been, and I think it was me, you,
mentors?
and Patrick. No, talking about Patrick Pianezza, and I can't remember who said it, but one of the things was we said that, the thing is with being a paramedic, we were able to go into a scene and we had the confidence, no matter what got thrown at us, between me and my partner, we're going to be able to figure out a way to work around it and get this patient taken care of, how we're going to extricate them, how we're going to do whatever we have to do. Between me and my partner, we're going to figure out how to get them in that ambulance and get them to the hospital safely. I don't remember if that was Patrick that talked about that, Scott, or was it you? I can't remember, but it was true. We would sit there and we'd have to problem solve. And what's happening, well, I talked with you earlier today, Len, and we kind of talked about it. The difference in these medics that are coming through the program now versus when we came through the program, all of us, we didn't have, not all of us had a cell phone in our pocket when we were going. We actually had to organically walk up and, oh my God, had to talk to people and communicate that way. It wasn't IRL, LOL, STFU. That's one of my favorites. No, but anyway, it was, we actually had to interact with people. And a lot of these medics that are coming up and going through the training, they grew up with that damn phone right there in their hand. So they don't know how to interact with people. And a lot of it, like you said, Len, a lot of being a paramedic is being able to communicate and work with people. And if you don't have that skill, you're hurt. If you don't know how to talk with a patient, you don't know how to work with somebody, you come across as cold. And I talked about when I was a preceptor, one of the things that I talked about, you talked about having all the technical knowledge in the world. You talk to some of these students that are coming right out of a school and they can quote the book for you, great. But, we're sitting there looking at a patient and I'm going, what's that? Well, you tell me what you think it is. You're the student. Subcutaneous emphysema. He could tell you all about it. He could quote the stats on it, but he didn't recognize it when he was sitting there looking at it, So that's some of the stuff that, as an older medic, that we need to be conveying to these people. And like whenever I had partners, even if it was an EMT basic or EMT ambulance, is what they were when I was a paramedic on a truck, it was like I was explaining everything I was doing because I'm getting them ready. I'm hoping that I'm prepping them to go to paramedic school. That was my job. My job was whatever happened on that truck, it was my fault. If my driver messed something up, it's on me. This is my truck, okay? I expected a lot out of the folks that were working with me because I didn't, I got a pretty big ass, but I don't want any of it chewed off. And that's just the way I rolled. And I'm sure that all of us on this channel, surely the folks that you've worked with, you've been trying to help them get into a paramedic school or get further into where they want to go. Have we all not done that?
Oh, we've tried, but you can't flip the top of their head up and pour your knowledge into their skull.
No, you can't. But
if I had a good basic, I wanted to keep them.
A good basic's worth they're worth their weight in gold.
Absolutely.
Well, here's the deal. Paramedics save people. EMT basics save paramedics. Yes,
right.
That's true. But I wanted them to be able to progress and get further into the process. I don't want to hold anybody down at a basics wages.
But
that's terrible. I know.
Last week I taught advanced medical life support to a class, and I also teach ACLS. And one of the biggest questions missed when I ask an ACLS, I'll say, what is the most important thing you can do in a code? And they're all like intubation, epi, and all that stuff. They said it's chest compressions.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah.
And
they forget the basics.
Paramedics want to skip over that. And also when it comes to triage, an EMT will do a lot better triaging than a paramedic would. Because you're always thinking, what if? And that goes from, it goes from there. But someone might ask me, when I go to paramedic school, before I go, what's the most important thing I can learn? And I'll tell them pathophysiology, know how the body works. To this day, there's still times I don't know what's wrong with somebody, but I can tell you what ain't right. And I said, that's a lot of times that's the way you got to try to do it. They need this, it's not there. What do I have that I can put there? I mean, it's just, to me, you got to make it really simple. And the older I get, I got to make it simple because I can't remember all this stuff anymore.
Well, one of the things
you said you had taught two classes, ACLS and another one. What is the other one? Because I've never heard of that.
Advanced medical life support. Advanced medical life support, and there's pre-hospital trauma life support.
Well, I did the PHTLS, but I've never heard of this.
But it gets real deep into medical emergencies. It's all evidence-based. And I'm affiliate faculty with the NAMT, and I really promote it because they're constantly, very rapidly updating their material. And it's all evidence-based. Now, American Heart just come out last month with the new updates in ACLS, CPR. See, it changes every 5 to 6 years.
Mhm.
Some places will already be using the new technology before AHA updates it, and it focuses on resuscitation only, whereas the AMLS will actually, go into a lot of disease processes, a lot of other things that might be going on, and how to address that.
Check out the big brain on Brad. You're a smart motherfucker. That's right.
I see.
So it's a great class, and in fact, next month I'm teaching EPC, which is emergency pediatric care. It's a 16-hour class, 2 days, and you can't ever get enough pediatric training.
No.
Yeah.
And
Right.
what I do try to bring out in those classes and the PALS classes is we do not treat kids right in the medical profession. And what I mean by that is you get to the hospital and you've half-assed it. You got to take time to make that resuscitation work in those first few minutes. You need to treat that kid right. Get their tube, get their drugs on board, get their route to where you can actually work on the way to the hospital. And people's like, man, we got to get them there. I said, there's a reason 96% of out of hospital pediatric codes die. And we're afraid to give them the proper amount of pain medicine they need. So they associate medical interaction with a painful thing. So, and it makes them comfortable, not be so intimidated as these kids have needs, and we really do not treat them right. You look back through the years, and yeah, I've been that guy that fire department comes and throws them on your stretcher, and you get there and you're still trying to intubate by the time you get to the hospital. Yeah, so
Yeah, maybe they just needed sugar.
it's a great class. I'll be teaching that next month. It goes back to where, and I don't want to discourage any of these young medics, because I think it's encouraging to me when I get an orientation class full of young people that's wanting to get into this. So much training is done virtual training anymore, online,
Right.
just like we're doing now. But if I can get them to come to these hands-on classes, a lot of them, they want to come back. They said, hey, man, this is what I've been needing, to actually put their hands on it. A lot of them are a product of the generation or what we got now. Relationships, a lot of time with them is on telephones, social media, and they really lack the one-on-one conversation skills. Really hard for them to interact with an 80 or 90-year-old geriatric patient.
Yeah.
Right.
Hands-on is the best way to be taught.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I want to float something to y'all. I've got a panel of very smart people on this podcast tonight. And I was sitting there and thinking about, because there is a crunch of EMS shortages across this country.
Mhm.
And I got to thinking, I heard where somebody was like, should they be able to take EMT at a younger age? Because you can take your EMT registry at 17, you just won't get your certificate mailed to you until you're 18 for your national registry. And, I got to thinking, there are, in high schools across Mississippi, there's Votex, where you can go and learn to be a mechanic. You can go and learn to be a welder or a machinist, or you can learn electrical stuff. You can learn all this stuff. What would be wrong with taking those juniors and seniors, and you talk about having 2 years of half a day of school is nothing but going through the EMT type
It's
curriculum.
happening.
It's happening, Rob.
Yeah, it's already happening.
We're getting into
Okay.
schools.
Okay.
We're getting into schools, and
Been going on for about, 2 to 3 years now, Len?
yeah,
Damn
some
it.
places more. What really bothers me now is EMS is not seen as a necessity in a lot of places anymore. It's become a convenience. 911, you go to the house, I need help getting from the bed to the recliner.
Yeah.
3 hours later, I need to get back to my bed. And to me, I'll be blunt, those people need a different living arrangement.
They
I
do.
don't think it's our role. It's not our role to go do that for these people. Yeah, I understand it, but EMS stands for Emergency Medical Services, and but it has come as an expectation.
That we're home
And
health.
And the thing about private EMS, it's been good to me. It's fed my family for 40 years. I presently work in it, but a lot of it is done because of politics. It's been proven that most of the 911 calls that we run, you shouldn't run licensed sirens to it.
That's right.
60 or 70% of ambulance wrecks are running priority one back to the hospital. But when you got them saying, I want an ambulance on scene in 7 minutes, if ambulance A won't do it, ambulance B will. I hate that the politics play so much into it. I work on the Gulf Coast now. We got an excellent relationship with the fire departments, law enforcement down there. And I worked in, rural Hancock County for a little while before I transferred over to the city part. Man, those guys and girls on those volunteer fire departments, they're out there running, burning their gas and paying for that. And the relationship that we have with them, is pretty remarkable. So, I really like that part of it. But the other thing is, I'll take care of people. I'll go help them move stuff like that with it. And I'm afraid, though, it's a part of EMS now to where it's becoming a convenience in a lot of those cases. And it's like, you go do a lift assist at somebody's house and they got 5 grown men there. And they're like, well, that's what y'all are for. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to pick your grandma up and put her in a bed. No, that's what you're for. And I'm like, okay. But yeah, that's the part that's the biggest discouraging part of it for me right now.
Yeah. On a lot of these calls that we were, not necessary, wasn't necessary, certainly wasn't necessary running lights and sirens to,
Well, right now tonight, I can guarantee you with this cold snap,
Yep.
we have a large homeless population. And they're going to get a lot of calls tonight, people threatening suicide, because then they get 3 days
That's
in a
right.
facility getting paid.
100% all right on that. Yep.
That's what's going on tonight.
Yes, it is. And yep, I'm aware of that. And what are they going to do though? I mean, I know they shouldn't abuse the ambulance service, but they're taking advantage. They're taking advantage of the rules and the way to get because there's no shelter for them.
And I agree with that, because I think, well, what if it was me? So that's what makes me push my anxiety down. What if it was me? What if it was one of mine? And I do what I got to do. Now, I have picked up the same psych patient 3 times in one night.
Yeah. Well, that's one good thing about a tiered system. Going back to a tiered system. For these people that need help getting in and out of their recliner, back to the bed, whatever, you don't send your paramedic truck on that.
Well, we're running. I know a lot of places have gone to the tiered, like it's not used to. Before it used to be, had to be a paramedic on every 911 call, but now you're running out of paramedics.
Yeah.
And we'll have they don't call them intermediates anymore. They're advanced EMTs. We got some basic trucks and advanced trucks, and and the advanced EMT the new protocols that rolled out, they can give some medication. They can give epi. They can start an IV. They can't intubate, but they'll put down those eye gels and Kings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
EOA kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's a lot different now. EOA, if you let go of it, it'd come out. These actually will stay down there, and they'll call for ALS if they need it. Some of them.
If your dispatch is smart enough to know which one to send.
It's and I've tried to get through some of them. They'll call for ALS, and it's like I'm 1 block from the hospital, and I'm like, well, I'm 20 minutes away. Just load them.
Roll in.
Yeah. So that's a learning curve with some of them, but I don't really want to hit the young guys so hard anymore. But it's just because they're born in. Vic, you've been working at it straight through like I have for the most part. It's changed so much.
Oh, it's changed a lot.
And I can't really fault them because they were born into it.
Yeah.
And the way that it is now.
I'm the longest of the tooth on this panel. I had the P before any of y'all, and I was a basic before any of y'all. And when I started, you talk about the tiered system. When I started on the coast, we had all basic units. All the EMT ambulances were in Gulfport, and they had drivers as partners. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you'd end up with 2 EMT ambulances. That was sweet because you could swap out who was driving and who was treating the patient, so you weren't getting overloaded with doing all the patient reports. But a lot of time we had drivers, and the one paramedic that we had that was on shift was in the Sprint truck for Gulfport, and he was trying to cover everything out in the county, because the city of Gulfport, the fire department, had the paramedics that were there in the city, and a basic ambulance would come up, and the paramedic from the fire department would jump in the basic ambulance with us and take them to the hospital. But if you went up the road to Socia, somebody had a wreck on 49 up in Socia, that Sprint truck was following behind you. And a lot of times it was, hey, this is a pretty busy night. I could start an IV and run up a charge on an emergency call, but really this patient really doesn't need it. Rob can handle it with this driver, and he can get him to the hospital, and then I'm still available in case somebody's having a myocardial infarction over here in Orange Grove. So there was a lot of that was going on. And one of the things it did for me was when I went to paramedic school, I saw, people that were going in this paramedic school that didn't have as much experience as me with patient care. I had oodles of patient care because I was a lot of times the person that was taking care of that patient. And it was you had to call for the paramedic to back you up on a lot of stuff. Well, you want to talk about burning a medic out, just run them to death like that. You shorten the service life. They say that medics last for 3 to 5 years on the street, and that's not all of them last that long.
Yeah.
Well, Len, you said you're on the Gulf Coast. What are you doing now?
Well, I'm.
I hear you're doing a lot of teaching, but where are you?
I work for
Nope.
on the Gulf Coast. I've really enjoyed working for them. They allow me to function as a critical care paramedic. We got one other critical care paramedic down there. There's not a lot of us around. Of course, they have a few nurse medic trucks, and we'll do a lot of specialty care calls. But then I've been helping a lot with the teaching, which I want to become a full-time educator because, like I said, this is year number 40, and my body's just not hanging in with what my mind wants to do anymore.
And
that's what I'd like to do.
That M30 worked on all of our backs.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you had mentioned, Len, what do we do when we need to take a break? Why don't we take a 5-minute break, and we will be right back after this. In fact, we're coming right back now. See how quick that was? We just bounced right back. It was the magic of editing.
Yeah.
So, listen, one of the reasons I want to make sure, Vic, you've been on here several times. Scott, you've been on a bunch. Len, this is your first time, but really didn't allude because we got Len talking about all of his time on Rescue 7, but Vic and Len were partners for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And I happen to know Vic just from outside of EMS and in EMS. I know Vic can run you kind of close to the ragged edge there, Len, and a lot of times he might step a foot or two over, but he'll always keep you just outside of getting in trouble. Mm-hmm. I know y'all got some stories of y'all working on the truck. I want to hear some of them. Vic, let's hear if you got one.
All right. Well, when me and Len graduated paramedic school, there was so many of us at AAA that went to school that year that they had to double us up to work together on the trucks.
Wow.
Ruh-roh.
So me and Len got partnered up. We worked Poplarville a good bit, Stone County a good bit. Well, we're working out of Poplarville. And of course, me and Len's always like to aggravate each other, kind of push the limits there. We're taking turns of who's in the back versus who's driving. Well, my turn to drive. When the toner goes off, we go out, take 26. We hit 59. We're headed back north. The call was just outside of the Lumberton city limits on Highway 13.
Okay.
It's an MPA. We know it's a log truck versus a car, and we're told 3 patients. Well, I'm a huge rock and roll fan. I flop in the cassette, AC/DC's.
Highway to Hell.
Hell's Bells or Highway to Hell, but I've got it turned all the way up. Len's always the serious one between the two of us.
Imagine that.
I'm over there jamming out, and I'm hitting about 85, 90 mile an hour, and Len's over there looking at me. He turns the stereo down. I turn it back up. He turns it down. He says, "Do you realize what we're going to?" I said, "Yeah, it's a wreck." So I turn it back up. He turns it back down. He says, "Do you realize it could be somebody dead or almost dead?" I said, "Yeah, I know it, dude. That's the cool shit about our job I like." I just cranked it back. Len's over there looking at me like I've done lost my mind. We get there, and it ended up being a really, really good call. The 2 women, elderly women in the car that went head on with the 18-wheeler both got broken femurs. And
you only have one hair traction splint on the truck?
We had a Sager and a hair.
Okay.
Yeah, we were covered. We ended up, luckily, calling Rescue 7. The guy in the 18 wheeler is acting like he's hurt. His only problem is he can't get out because the truck's turned over on its side. So finally, they come along and just pull the windshield out, and he steps out. He ain't got a scratch on him.
Yep.
But Rescue 7 back then could haul 2 patients, so we put them both on that truck on the helicopter, and we were able to get to 1025 from the guy in the log truck. And we turn around and go right back to the station.
Well,
man's just
when you guys were working double trucks, did you want to drive or did you want to be in the back?
We were pretty new at the time, so we kind of liked getting back there and
yeah.
Okay.
And we was like, well, I got this one, I got that one. But Vic was cutting up on the way to that call. But when you get out of the call, he's flipping that different mode. He was just a serious arrest of us, And after the call, he's like, let's go get a hamburger, But we've done that a lot. And like working the code, brand new paramedics, like I get to shock, I get to intubate. And, so it worked out pretty cool. And, one story I got about Vic, I laugh about this all the time, is we all got our regulars, and we had this one guy that wasn't the nicest patient in the world. And he kind of got on my nerves a little bit. And Vic's like, oh, I love him, man. We get along great. So we start going to Hattiesburg with him, and Vic's like, pull up in this store. I'm like, what the heck? I figure if you got to go to the bathroom, you got to go to the bathroom. So Vic comes out with some Cheetos and a Dr. Pepper. And I hear, he said, hold on, Len. He's back there in the back. He gets an O2 tubing, and this guy's a quadriplegic. He runs that O2 tubing in that coat, tapes it to the side, sticks it in his mouth. And he's out there going, Rick is Dr. Pepper, and Vic's like, all right, here you go. Give him a Cheeto.
Man, Vic, right on.
You don't hear that crap now, but
that's right.
He took care of that old boy.
That's humanity.
That's right. Right on.
That is humanity. That is what paramedics are. That took Vic. That cost you $2 to buy a bag of chips and get that man a Dr. Pepper.
But you broke every protocol to do it. And so therefore, you're the hero.
But I don't think OSHA wasn't on to us a lot now, but that's like a $30,000 fine now to have food in the back of that truck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You'll be shot for this? Nah, I don't think so. More like chewed out. I've been chewed out before.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's the beautiful thing. Look,
it.
I've said it many times on this show. Most of us are no longer functioning on the truck, so we have no HR department to answer to.
That's
the
right.
statute of limitations have run out. Y'all about to hear some shit on this show. So
I still got to be politically correct, guys.
yeah, because now I do kind of want to talk about that, because you have a company that you're doing a lot of training with that you've started, huh, Len? Let's hear a little about that.
I just want to show you I had some mugs made, but she can't find them. She probably threw them away. But it's called Marshall Education and Consulting Services, LLC. And I've got a few contracts.
Is that what I'm seeing on your shirt?
That's really unique name there, by the way.
Well, if I turn around and show you the back of it, you might can see it.
There you go.
Yep. But I do a lot of AHA classes, American Heart, stuff like that.
Yeah,
and
I like him.
I've got a degree in occupational safety and health. And me and Vic, we've worked together on some industrial projects, safety, medical, stuff like that. And at one time, I was the safety and risk specialist for GMR for the Southeast United States. So, I really enjoy that position, stuff like that. But what I do now is for consulting, like get people ready for in OSHA inspections and actually go in and do a mock one and kind of get them to, here's what they're going to find, here's what they're going to hit you on and stuff like that. And we sit down, I'll take pictures and here's what I found and here's what needs to be corrected. Not a lot of that stuff's taken off right yet, but it will. But I can do that. And like, OSHA requires now on these construction sites and a lot of business, with so many other people there, they got to have so many people that's training CPR, first aid, and the AED and stuff like that. So I just did one a couple of weeks ago, but I'm trying to get that up. And I've got a few contracts with some clinics and stuff on the coast in Northeast Louisiana. and to the point to where I'm going to have some instructor classes in January and try to take on a few more instructors to help me out with that. And
Where are you teaching? Where
he
are you
said,
doing?
"Where?"
At the companies.
Well, yeah, my brother has a large church here in Poplarville, and he lets me use a couple of classrooms here. And that's kind of what my base address is. But for the most part, who wants to drive to Poplarville? I'll do a lot of them on site with them, set up. And if they got so many people, they get a group rate. And I'll go do it at their place. I'll take all my equipment there and audio visual stuff like that. I'll tell them mine's strictly by the book because I'm also faculty with AHA and AMT. And I'll go out and audit some of these centers. I've helped set up about 6 NAMT training centers in Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi over the last 18 months. And it's for people that want to set them up. I go help them get that set up. But I'll tell people this ain't the place to where you come and buy a card. The cards ain't for sale. I go 100% by the requirements of the NAT and AHA. And I'll say, look, if you're just looking for a card, it's not going to happen. And so yeah, it'll be I's dotted, T's crossed, or I'll tell them, or I'm not your guy. So
Yep.
I's dotted, T's crossed. And tell a quick story today. So after paramedic, I went and got my RN and figured that was, way to make more money, go work in the ER, and hated being in the hospital. Couldn't stand working in the ER.
You trapped inside 4 walls, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. So I haven't really practiced. I've kept my RN active for 25 years without practicing. I do my continuing education to keep it going. Without practicing, you have to do CE as an RN. Anyway, I volunteered recently. Every Monday, I go down to the homeless shelter where a psychiatrist does evaluations with these or counseling with these homeless people. And they told me when I went in and asked, I was trying to do some research on what their wants and needs are. And one of their needs was to have an RN to come in and do blood sugar blood sugar, vital signs for this psychiatrist. So I said, I'll do that. I'm an RN. I could do that. I've kept my license active. So, man, I went and bought all the stuff. I had to go buy everything, to do all these vital signs. $150, spent on all this. And I went in there today with all this stuff that I bought, and the guy's like, yeah, we need a copy of your license, and we need your insurance. I was like, well, my health insurance? My auto insurance? What kind of insurance?
No, your malpractice.
My malpractice insurance. And I said, so I'm here to do vital signs, and you want me to have malpractice insurance? And I was like, I'll leave if that's what you want me to do. But I don't have insurance, and I'm not going to carry insurance to come over here and do vital signs for you. But that's dotting the I's and crossing the T's. That's just absolutely ridiculous.
So what came of that? Did you leave, or did you?
They haven't decided yet. The fact that I had an active license, they were happy with, and so I got the screenshot over to them, and they let me work today. And so next week I'll know. I told him, I said, look, this doctor, he's retired. So I don't even think, and he's the one doing diagnosing and writing scripts.
Exactly.
So I was like, I'm going to work under him and whatever life insurance he has.
Well, the AHA requires, one of the regulations is that you have liability insurance.
Do you carry your own?
I carry liability insurance, and I also carry professional liability insurance. And it's because, we're such a litigious society.
Yeah.
People want to, not only they want to sue the provider, but okay, how are you trained?
But why isn't your employer paying for that? Your employer.
Oh, well, this is for my company.
Okay.
My own company, I carry that. And if I bring an instructor on, if they teaching for me, they're covered under that. But if you go out on your own, you're technically supposed to have your own liability insurance, or the AHA can drop you for that. And the AHA requires for every class that you teach, every student, you provide a book. Yeah, some people think your prices are a little high, but they get a book. I got overhead. It cost me $30 per student for a CPR class. That's what it cost me.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, it's I carry the insurance. They get their textbook like they're supposed to get. And
you mind if I ask what that insurance runs a year, in case I need to pick this up for my volunteer work?
Well, both of them is $700 a year.
Okay, that's kind of what that. There's a nurse practitioner that's working with this guy too, and he said he had his own insurance, but he's doing diagnostics. These guys are diagnosing. I'm not diagnosing anything. So, in Mississippi, as an RN, if I am working for a hospital system or even a doctor, I don't have to have a single hour of CE. Not a single hour of CE. Over 25 years, I don't need a single hour if I'm working for somebody. But because I'm not working I need, I think it's 72 hours of CE I have to turn in every year.
Well, some of the NAMT classes, like for PHLS, NAMT, or, AMLS, that's 16 hours a pop. And I'll tell people that I say, if you take your PHLS, your AMLS, your EPC, as long as your ACLS, you don't actually have to have a formal refresher that satisfies all of it.
Oh, really? Okay. Okay.
And probably not probably, you'll damn sure pick up more than what you pick up sitting in a refresher class. Those usually turn into nothing but they end up being like one of these episodes. They're war stories. So your company that you have, Len, you've got a website, right? What's your website?
Well, I'm still working on that. I haven't released it yet. And
Okay.
actually, I got a Facebook page too that I haven't really released yet because I want to get some, I don't want it to be where somebody goes there and says, look, is this all there is? I'm trying to, get my program on board and stuff before I actually release that to work, because I've never been one to like half-ass anything.
So basically what you're saying, Len, is you don't have your website ready yet. So
No, that's right. Yeah, I do not.
More to come later.
Yes.
Come later. So on a future episode of Getting 10-8, we'll make sure once that website gets launched, we'll make sure that we have Len come back on where we can talk about the website, and we'll have it in the description of that episode. Because having somebody that is going to teach a class and teach it right, like he's putting his name on it, is very important. It sure beats the old sitting around and telling war stories.
Hey, Len, I'll trade you a trip on a sailboat or a power yacht out to Ship Island. Let me sit in on one of your classes.
It'll happen.
All right, good. We'll do that trade because I got a lot of access to boats, but I'd like to get an update to,
we can do the class on your boat.
There you go. There you go. We need to get together. Right on. That's all the boats are out of Gulfport. Rob's going to come down. He loves going out in the boat. He's been out on one of the sailboats before.
Let's meet up one of those cigar lounges one night and talk. I love cigars.
Sounds great. That sounds great.
Well, look, let me tell you what. Also, folks, this isn't one of my shirts, but this podcast now has some merch. And we have merch for EMS practitioners. We have shirts for firefighters. We have shirts for law enforcement. We have a shirt.
The hoodie.
And the hoodies. Are great. Hoodies are cool, yes. And we have dispatcher shirts. And also, I added something new to the Shopify store for us, and that is we have tumblers. All of us in there, you didn't have those insulated tumblers when I was on the truck. But
I love them.
But if I could have kept my coffee warm all day, I'd have drank more coffee back then. So I've got tumblers for each section. There you go. Old paramedic. I've got tumblers for each section in that website as well. For EMS, firefighters, law enforcement. A lot of those shirt designs that are on there I came up with. They came up from things that actually happened. There's one where you'll see a old 1980s model Type 2 Ford ambulance jumping railroad tracks. That was that was me.
Like you said, the van at Washington Parish with the racing rim. That's what it was built for.
This is not condescending at all, because I had a lot of great people over there, but it's the closest thing I ever seen to Mother Jugs and Speed.
Yes, exactly right. I know. And then go work the rodeo on every Friday night or Saturday night, whatever that was.
I wouldn't trade that time for nothing.
I agree. I love Sonny. I thought Sonny was great.
All right, so we got that edited out. No problem there, Scott St.Germain. We'll definitely protect those of us that are innocent in that situation. So, so anyway, I think you've got some questions for Len. Do you want to fire away there, Scott?
Yeah, Len, I want to know how the cell phone has changed from, in the 90s we didn't have cell phones, right? Well, we did. We had a bag phone and
Oh, yeah.
I was so excited because in about 92, 93 the bag phone came out, and it was the first time you mentioned emergency one,
Mhm.
and they had a bag phone. Remember that?
Yeah,
Them calling into the, the hospital.
we had that. And
So I would make sure that I bought the bag phone when I got my first cell phone. But we didn't have cameras on our bag phones, and so tell me how cameras and the iPhones or just having that in your hand, all that technology
Oh
right in
yeah.
your hand, how has that changed you
well,
in being a paramedic?
the we, I don't think I don't know who uses the state net anymore. I'm sure there are people that does. But usually we call our reports in with that. All the protocol apps and everything are on the phone now. And we've got this thing, it's a remarkable tool called Pulsera. These facilities that use it, we have the app on their phone, they have it the system in the hospital, and we could go on there and say, like, give it the name and stuff like that, the patient on the phone, and it's this app that we're filling out. And if it's like a STEMI or something like that, we can take a picture of the EKG and activate it, and even the cardiologists don't call it. Everybody gets a picture of that EKG at that time, and they call in all their people, trauma alerts, stroke alerts. They even got sepsis alerts now, but they get that information immediately. They have the EKG, and it's confidential, but they'll have the name, and that patient will be registered before we ever get there.
So
And if
you
they've
have
got
specific apps you're working. You have apps that the hospital are using that you guys can communicate with. Is that right?
yes, yes,
Wow,
yeah,
really?
that is it. And talk about cell phones with the cameras. Now you got to be careful everywhere you go. You go to a casino, everybody's got that phone out recording you.
Yeah.
I've had patients in the back of the ambulance. I'm documenting this, and recording you now on that stuff.
Wow.
And so they got that, and they're talking about some places actually have the cameras in the back of the truck now, and it don't show everything. But at first you hear mixed feelings on it. But of the things that go on now, the accusations that people get against them, I would be all for that.
Really? So you're
Yeah,
more for having the cameras recording
I
everything?
would be,
I mean, if you're
because
doing everything by the book, you run
yeah,
your
you're right, you're
call.
right.
Why not have that to protect you?
But the accusations, that people make against you and stuff like that, and being accused of stuff that didn't happen. So, I would be all for that. Actually, I really would. You talk
Yeah,
about back in the '90s.
kind of like in law enforcement, they're all wearing body cams now.
Yeah, is exactly. And when I was doing the safety and risk job, the trucks have cameras in them now and stuff like that. And a lot of people were scared they're going to get them in trouble. But 99% of the time, I used it to clear people with and to save them. It really protected them 99% of the time more than get them in trouble.
All right, the only question I
I-
have is, do the cameras run if there's no patient on the truck?
When you're
Uh,
sleeping, does it catch you sleeping on the stretcher?
there are some technologies out there that they're always able to go and pull stuff. But a lot of time they won't flag until an event happens. Like the AI cameras, if you go through a stop sign without stopping, the camera picks you up. If you put your cell phone to your ear, it'll say "put down phone," and so it's they will get you with that. And but
In
but
the
there's
ambulance?
huh
This is in the ambulance?
yes,
So this
and
is fail safe to a whole new level.
it
Yeah.
is because the camera records the crew and it records what they're looking at, and then sometimes they'll have them on the back of the truck even uh, to get you. But like I
That
said,
was
I
my
use them
question.
more
In the
to
back of the
save somebody.
truck, that was my question. In the back of the truck, if there is no patient in the back of the truck, is that camera rolling?
They can pull that footage.
Wow. So they catch you smoking in the
So
truck.
that's why y'all can't work on the truck anymore.
That makes
You're
long
absolutely
distance.
right.
That
I'd
makes
be
long
fired
distance
quick.
transfers. Nobody wants to take an long distance transfer now. Lord, have
Man,
mercy.
that's incredible. They need to really pay these guys more if they got to work that much harder.
When you talk about back when the cell phones first come out and stuff, I remember remember when they were phone books?
Yep.
Emergency One had on the back of their phone book, this service now uses cellular technology.
Yeah.
That was their advertisement. We now use cellular technology, so that was cool. It was the bag phone you had to talk to and stuff like
Yep.
that.
Right.
Well, we had a little tablet. I mean, it was probably you can't see it. Maybe this big. It was an orange little tablet. It had patient's age, male or female. You just kind of, it was
The
good
mobile
for the
medic
paramedic.
pad.
Yeah, mobile medic pad. You could just check these boxes. You could throw your vital signs in there, and when you called your state report in, you got it all right here. You had
And you're
everything. You could
doing
read
it in
out.
that format.
And
I still make notes. I mean,
sure, on your glove. And I got to, when we ran out of the pad, I learned how to write it on my glove, right? And so I got into,
There you
developing.
go.
Yeah,
You got to put it right in front of you, Lynn.
right
Right
in
in.
my face.
Okay.
because I can't remember a lot of stuff anymore.
I got into developing these medical devices, and I got into technology, and I thought, man, I really could help out these paramedics. We could have an app that you drop all that into the mobile medic pad, like you said, and that just gets shot off straight to the hospital. Forget the state net, forget the time you got to waste calling this patient and calling this report in. So it sounds like it's there.
Yeah, it is.
That's good. That's good.
All right, folks. Well, I think that's enough for us to call this a dang show. What do y'all think?
Heck yeah.
Wasn't a
Hey,
good one there.
Listen, man, this was a great show. I really enjoyed catching up with y'all and bringing Len in and catching up with him. Wealth of information that you brought with us, Len. I appreciate you coming here. If you want any content that you want us to talk about on the show, you can certainly send us an email at gettin108@gmail.com. Scott and Vic, point to where that is. Gettin108, point to where it is. There it is. Vic, you're completely... There it is.
Right down.
Gettin108@gmail.com. Shoot us an email. We'll talk about whatever you bring up. If you got any good stories that you don't want to come on and talk about yourself, send us the stories. We'll talk about that son of a gun. We'll talk about you if you ain't here. We just won't mention your name unless you say that we can. Anyway, this was a great show. I appreciate y'all for coming on. I appreciate y'all for coming along and listening. Hope to see y'all back here next week. Hey, if you've made it this far into the video, go ahead and look over there and mash that like button. And if you hadn't subscribed, click that subscribe so you'll see the notification when we come out. We try to get a post up every week on Fridays. Sometimes we miss, depending on life, but we try to get something out for y'all every Friday. So look forward to seeing you again next week. Y'all take care and keep those stretchers made up and clean.